Get ready to be moved by a story of resilience and determination. Lucas had an Olympic dream, but everything changed when an accident took his legs. Amid pain and darkness, he found a new strength to move forward. This is a journey of courage that proves our greatest challenges can become our greatest victories. Don't miss this inspiring story that will touch your heart and show that, with determination, nothing is impossible. Click play and watch now. Lucas was a young 24-year-old who lived and breathed athletics. Since he was a child, his life was marked by speed and an insatiable desire to be the fastest. He used to say that running was his way of feeling free, of connecting with something bigger than himself. In the parks of his hometown, where he began taking his first steps, the dream of one day competing in the Olympics seemed distant but never impossible. He knew he was talented, and this talent only grew over the years. His routine was rigorous. He would wake up before sunrise, run through the empty city while the world was still asleep, and then go to practice with his track and field team. His family's support was unconditional. His parents were always in the stands, attending every one of his regional competitions, and his friends were like his second family, cheering him on with each victory and encouraging him to keep going even in defeat. Everything seemed to be going in the right direction. Lucas was only a few months away from competing for a spot in the Olympics, his greatest dream. He could already feel the adrenaline of international competitions, the expectation of representing his country. However, one ordinary night, everything changed. On his way back from a regional competition, while driving down the road, a truck unexpectedly crossed his path. The impact was devastating. He woke up in the hospital, not quite understanding what had happened. The pain in his body was unbearable, but nothing compared to the news the doctors gave him. Lucas would lose both legs. The news of the amputation hit Lucas like a death blow. Lying in his hospital bed, he stared at the ceiling, trying to process what the doctors had told him. He would lose his legs. His mind spiraled, and the only question he could form was, now what? What will happen to my dream? His entire life, his purpose, seemed to have been ripped away in an instant. He couldn't see a future for himself. In the days following the surgery, Lucas sank into a deep silence. He avoided visits from friends and family, unable to bear the expression of compassion in the eyes of those who loved him. The mere thought of never running again destroyed him inside. Running, which had once been his passion and his freedom, now felt like an impossible and distant dream, something he would never experience again. What was left for someone who had dedicated his entire life to a goal that now seemed unattainable? Isolation became his new reality. Lucas refused to participate in the physical therapy sessions recommended by the doctors, thinking there was no point in trying. He spent his days staring into space, wondering how his life had changed so abruptly. Depression took hold of him, and he withdrew from everything around him, including the people who cared most about him. His family tried, in vain, to bring him back to life, but he simply didn't want to listen. The dream of becoming an Olympic athlete was dead, and at that moment, Lucas believed that he was, too. Time passed, but Lucas's emotional pain remained intense. He knew he needed to start rehabilitation, but his spirit was broken. Then Eduardo, a man who had gone through a similar situation, entered his life. Eduardo was a former athlete who had also lost both legs in an accident. But instead of giving up, he found a new way to compete, using prosthetic legs. Determined to change Lucas's perspective, Eduardo visited him in the hospital. At first, Lucas was reluctant to accept any kind of help. He was convinced that his life as an athlete was over, that he would never be able to run again. "You don't understand," he would say, "my dreams died in that accident." But Eduardo insisted, sharing how he himself had gone through the same feelings of hopelessness and emptiness until he decided to try something new. He described the sensation of running again, even with prosthetics, and how it had renewed his sense of purpose. Eduardo took Lucas to one of his training sessions, and what Lucas saw left him impressed. There was a group of people who, like him, had gone through amputations, but were challenging their limits. Some were running, others were playing basketball, and they all seemed full of life and determination. Something about that environment began to spark a glimmer of hope in Lucas, although he was still hesitant. Finally, Lucas agreed to try an experimental session with the prosthetics. The beginning was painful. Every step was difficult, each movement required monumental effort. The first few weeks were filled with physical and mental suffering. He fell many times and felt the sharp pain of adaptation, but he also began to notice small progress. Eduardo's words echoed in his mind, "You can still run." Not like before, but in a new way. The training continued, and Lucas began to regain his confidence. The pain gradually subsided, and each day he felt stronger and more capable. Little by little, he began to realize that his passion for running was still alive. It just needed a new way to be expressed. With the support of Eduardo, his family, and the new friends he had made, Lucas began to believe that he could, indeed, return to competing. This period of recovery was not easy, and challenges were constant. Lucas's body had changed, but his inner strength was reborn. He began setting new goals, dreaming again, not of the Olympics, but of a new form of triumph. Athletics was no longer just about winning races, it was about conquering himself. Over time, Lucas signed up for his first race using prosthetics, a local competition that would mark the turning point in his life. The day of the race finally arrived. The morning air was fresh, but Lucas felt a mix of anxiety and nervousness that made his body feel heavier. He had prepared for months for this moment, but the fear of failure was still present. Memories of the accident and the devastating news that changed his life surfaced in his mind. For a moment, he wondered if he was really ready for this. Lucas looked around. There were other people in the race, some with prosthetics, some without, but they were all there for the same reason, to challenge their own limits. Eduardo, who had been by his side since the beginning of his recovery, was also there, offering words of encouragement. "You've made it this far, Lucas. Now, just run with your heart." When the starting gun went off, Lucas felt the adrenaline rushing through his body. He began to run, but soon felt the difficulty of the first steps. Running with prosthetics was completely different from anything he had experienced before. The feeling was both liberating and challenging, but with each step, he remembered all the hard work, the falls, and the pain he had overcome to get there. The first meters were the hardest. Lucas felt the metal legs vibrate with each impact on the ground, and for a moment he doubted he could complete the race. Emotional tension began to take over, and he felt an intense urge to stop. Physical pain returned, and his thoughts were clouded with insecurities. But then, in the middle of the race, something changed. Lucas remembered all the moments of struggle and resilience, how he had hit rock bottom and then rose up again. He thought of his family, his friends, and especially Eduardo, who had shown him that the impossible was just a mental barrier. An inner strength he didn't know still existed began to emerge. "I'm still here," Lucas thought, "and as long as I'm here, I'll keep running." He picked up the pace. His eyes were fixed on the finish line, and the crowd in the stands seemed to disappear. All that mattered in that moment was proving to himself that he was still capable. Lucas began to overtake other runners. The pain, which had once seemed insurmountable, was now part of the journey, and he embraced it as fuel to keep going. When he was only a few meters from the finish line, the feeling of victory was already present in his heart. It didn't matter if he finished first or last. What truly mattered was that he hadn't given up. The man who, months before, believed his life was over, was now crossing a symbolic finish line, a line that represented his new life, his new identity as a reborn athlete. Lucas crossed the finish line with tears in his eyes. He wasn't the first to complete the race, but that didn't matter. The crowd gave him a standing ovation, and he felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He had overcome not just the race, but the darkness that had nearly defeated him. After crossing the finish line, Lucas felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. He looked up at the sky and let the tears fall. They weren't tears of sadness or frustration, but of relief and gratitude. There was something profoundly transformative in that moment. It wasn't just a physical victory, but a victory over his own fears, doubts, and limitations. Eduardo was the first to reach him after the race. With a smile on his face, he said, "I knew you could do it, Lucas. Today, you proved to everyone, but especially to yourself, that you are still the same athlete, the same warrior." The two embraced, and Lucas felt that he was finally back in life. In the days and weeks that followed the race, Lucas realized that his journey inspired many people around him. It wasn't just a story about an athlete who overcame an accident. It was a life lesson on how willpower, the support of friends, and faith in overcoming could transform even the darkest circumstances. He began receiving invitations to share his story at sports and motivational events. What started as a simple rehabilitation race soon became a platform to inspire others who were also facing challenges. Lucas not only accepted these invitations but embraced the opportunity to help other amputees believe in themselves. Over time, Lucas realized that his passion for athletics hadn't disappeared, it had simply transformed into something greater. He no longer ran just to win races but to show the world that overcoming is possible even in the most adverse conditions. In his talks and events, Lucas always shared a simple but powerful message. True victory isn't crossing the finish line first but never giving up on running. He found that what really defined him wasn't the gold medal or the podium, but the ability to keep moving forward even when everything seemed lost. Lucas became a living example that the impossible can be overcome with perseverance, faith, and the support of the right people. He put aside his old dreams of being an Olympic athlete and embraced a new purpose: to help others find their own victories, regardless of the circumstances. His words and story touched many lives, inspiring others to face their challenges with the same courage he demonstrated. Lucas's journey was a constant reminder that, as long as there is strength and a heart that doesn't give up, there will always be a new path. "I lost my legs," he would often say, "but I found something much greater, the certainty that the strength to move forward lies within each of us." If this story of resilience touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Your support helps us spread this inspiring message to even more people. And subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Together, let's share hope and motivation.